In the community policing program, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the community members who work with the officers. These are their stories.
Let's start. Well, thank you so much for coming. And then as I send an email to you all officers that we are, as a Bexley resident, we're trying to look for the better way to communicate with our officers. And we know you guys have this wonderful um, unit called the Diversity and Inclusion, which a few years ago I ran into Officer Scott Brown. He's not attending right this moment, but me and I went back probably 4 or 5 years ago when Dublin just started. And when I got to know him in his work as well as a person, it really opens up my world to see how I see the police officer in general, because I have a previously had experience with the Bexley Police Department to be not really present experience. So being said that, I think it's really important for us, for the community member, to really personalize the officers and on the other end, and the work together is good. So let me start either officer, Scott Brown is coming in. I'm letting Scott in. So let's see. Hi, Scott. Thank you for coming. I just talking about you, how we met a few years ago. And I can't hear Scott. He's muted. So officers, feel free to unmute yourself, but our members, unless you're not speaking, please stay mute, but the officers, please unmute yourself. And let's start with Officer Morris. And if you can, jump in, Scott, Officer Brown and Nicholson. Can you tell us how you guys started this program? And, let's go from there. I don't know who want to start talking first, but.
Well, I will defer to
Uh-oh, he's
Scott and Scott, because they are the pilot with it. So they were there from the beginning.
So the Officer Brown, can you go first then, since chronologically I know you first, so.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everybody. Sorry we got in a little bit late. We were trying to use a laptop and we had some technical difficulties. So instead we're on my phone now. So sorry about that. So our unit was started by the current chief of Upper Arlington, who was Lieutenant Farmer then when he was here. It was an idea he had. Basically, he looked at the community and realized we were not having a lot of connections with some of the folks in the community that represent a high percentage of our community. So some of the events that we weren't part of. So he kind of came up with an idea to try to designate some officers who, in addition to their normal duties, would be able to kind of put themselves out there and do that. So back in 2018, they came up with our unit. Scott and I put in. We were both very interested in being part of something that we find truly important, and building these bridges and making these connections. So it started 2018, and the main vision was just to be more approachable, to make sure the community felt comfortable talking to us. And felt that they could to come to us with any concerns or any thoughts they had, and to get the community's input on things that at that point we didn't really have a lot of community input from a lot of the Asian community. And this was our way to start doing that. Scott, if you want to go, if you want to add to that.
Yep. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay.
Yep.
It's a work laptop, so I never know how well they function.
Bingo.
Yeah, exactly what Scott said. We put it together. The goal, as I understood it, was to reach out to the underrepresented communities that we have and find out what issues that they might be dealing with that we don't even know about. I know a lot of the communities we work with tend to be pretty closed, not just to law enforcement, but to other communities, the population in general. So we wanted to kind of get our foot in the door, earn that trust if we could, and find out what issues they might be having that we can either help with or at least be aware of anytime we had to approach them with any issues that we were having.
Great. Just quick curiosity, the initial effort to start listening to the community that you haven't heard from them, did you guys have any difficulty reaching out? Because it's not like, happen overnight. So you might have to have an initial struggle or some strategy, put it in place.
Well, I'll jump on that. I had the luck of meeting a wonderful woman named Akisa from the beginning that definitely helped me meet a lot of other folks. So Akisa, props to you, because you helped us so much when we were starting out, that you helped us to get into some of the communities that I didn't know how would be, how people would feel about us. And you helped us make so many connections that I don't know if we would have made without you. So, you were a huge benefit to us, and you still are. You always have been. So it took us a little while to answer your question, to get into where I think the folks in these underrepresented communities really trusted us. They knew we weren't just going to go there and talk to them and tell them the pretty words they wanted to hear and then leave and not be there again if something happened. So it took a little while to build that trust, but once we did, I mean, as you know, Akisa, it's worked out well for everybody involved. The community and the police department both, I think, have definitely prospered from that. But it did take a little bit of time. It definitely didn't happen overnight. But finding, important people in those communities like yourself definitely helps with that.
Well, thank you. That was shocking to hear. That's you guys actually felt that way. So I feel so good. But also, then that's if that's the case, I really want to use, if I have any outreach in the community in Bexley, I really want the Bexley to understand there's the people, not just me, but everybody on this call are the important, people in our community. So hopefully moving forward, this is a good testament from the other side, from the police department, that how utilize somebody like us to reach out to the community that both of us will benefit. So that's a good testimony from that. So thank you so much. So hey, the Officer Moyes, do you want to add anything on your perspective? Because you told us you're a Bexley police officer for a long time, and he knows all the street that we live on. So
I do.
Be careful.
Yeah.
But, yes, you're breaking up though.
So I worked in Bexley for. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I worked in Bexley for 8 years, and then I left there and came to Dublin. So I worked with Steve Farmer, who's now the chief of Arlington. So I have a pretty good idea of the at least the Bexley community. But I can tell you the work that Scott did to pave the way for what we were able to do now. I can't speak enough to that. And Scott's right. It took a lot of time to build that trust, but that's allowed us to do more outreach now, and we've added 2 more officers to that unit. So there's a total of 4 officers that dedicate their time, not full time. It's an ancillary position to our diversity and inclusion unit, and we've been it's paid dividends. It's a wonderful program.
Mhm. And just add it back to those 2 officers, Brown and Nicholson. The initial time that when I had an encounter with the officers, Officer Brown and Nicholson, their attitude of listening to us, like, you know, they really wanted to listen what we feel instead of just if we say something, they, you know, turn around and be defensive or deny what we feel. I didn't have any feeling or experience like that from those 2 officers, so that really helped to, you know, when you want to listen, you really want to be listen, you know what I mean? So that kind of a personality, I think that really the officer's personality, the Scott said first that they jumped on to join this when the opportunity is available. So I think it, you know, thanks to their willingness to listen, I think that's a really important to go both ways. So I just need to point that out to you guys in, you know, the Bexley group, that you know, I really want you guys to feel the officer's personality and the willingness to listen. So so enough about me talking. So let's move on to the Upper Arlington officers. So the officer lieutenant, former Dan, moved to Upper Arlington, and then he started the very similar, I think if it's not same, and you guys are pretty new. I think I met you guys last year, right?
Yeah, so Steve Farmer, who is now our chief, used to be the lieutenant at Dublin, came up and brought the idea of continuing that diversity and inclusion program here in UA. And the talks began in 2019. We didn't officially get the ball rolling until about December 2019, January 2020-ish. So.
Yeah. So how did you guys did the outreach at the beginning? You know, to your particular community. It's, you know, it's not exactly same as Dublin, demographically speaking. So how did you guys doing right now?
So out of all of our minority population, our Asian population is still the highest, and I believe that it's pretty parallel to Dublin. But obviously meeting with Officer Scott Brown in our initial startup period was absolutely incredible. He pointed us to a lot of resources and a lot of different people, pointed us to you, Akisa, for us to be able to sit down with you and talk and figure out what we've been missing. And I know personally, you know, speaking as an African American, there have been points in times where I've felt like, you know, I don't necessarily have a voice in the community, or that I'm not necessarily understood by police growing up. And so when Chief Farmer brought this opportunity, I mean, I was ready to jump on it. And it's been incredible, just learning more about culture, especially within certain Asian cultures, just even the way that traffic stops are performed and things like that. We've learned a lot, and we're continuing to grow. It's only been a few months, like I said. We officially got the ball rolling around January 2020, and then with COVID going on, it's definitely slowed things up. But we are definitely excited on where we're going.
Great. Let's see. So there's a few, you know what, I think I should open up to our committee members. Is there anybody, I listed a few questions, but I'd like to hear from you guys' voice. So anybody wants to say, or oh, Stacy, do you want to say something?
Oh, I had actually sent you in the chat just
Oh,
because I didn't want to interrupt anybody. So that's why I was figuring you might have like you might want questions to go. I didn't want to interrupt the officers. But if you guys don't mind, there are a couple questions that I had just listening to all of it.
yeah.
Officer Morris, since you've worked in our community, do you think something like that could be possible in Bexley? Do you think it'd be well received?
I believe so. When I was there in the 90s, we were accused of some biased policing, and we we had no way to defend ourselves because we had, quite frankly, probably had in fact engaged in some biased policing, and there was some forced training that came along with that, and anytime you force someone to do something, you get don't often get the best results. You get resentment, um, but particularly from the guys who hadn't engaged in any of that behavior. So I think the community, the police department there. I know there's some still probably some dinosaurs there that experience that. Um, I think they would, in my opinion, would be very receptive to that because it was painful back then to be accused of that and not and not really be in a position to defend yourself. And and because we'd made zero effort to engage with any community, any part of our community, um, and and we paid the price for it. So I think that's a community that's I think really ready to 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 communicate between the police and their population.
Okay, Kathy, go ahead.
That was really helpful. Um, the situation in Bexley now is that there are an increasing number of African American residents who've come forward and told of unpleasant incidents with the Bexley police. And their and organizations are trying to figure out what the remedies are. And what I'm hearing from you is that from your perspective, you have no way to resolve, to kind of sit down and resolve the incidents. What
You,
I'm
you're,
not, excuse me?
I would say you're absolutely right. That's where we failed was that we made no effort to to prior to being accused, officially accused of being sued. Um, we made zero effort to reach out to that community, and I think uh, that that's why we in Dublin have done so well with our program is because Scott listened. They didn't just go into these meetings or with people and tell them, what we were about and why we were there. They actually just listened and then brought that back to the rest of the police department.
I guess, but when you have, um, a growing number of stories of incidents involving African Americans, who, as Officer Emmanuel mentioned, um, you know, feel, because of their history and because of the incidents themselves. I mean, they have some pretty harrowing stories. How would having this unit in Bexley help us to resolve that situation and make sure that situations like that don't happen again? Because there is a growing perception among people who have heard a lot of stories that we have a real problem. The question is, how are we we're looking for, how is this going to be a tool to resolve the tensions we have now between African American residents and the Bexley Police?
Well, I think what a unit like this would do would give them a voice, give them a say in in how the police and their community interact with them. You know, we just Scott and I and our other liaison diversity officers just hosted an open forum, and we invited members of our different populations of our community. And our goal in that was just to listen to what they had to say, and just opening that line of communication certainly helps. Training, you know, is always beneficial, and having officers that
Uh-oh.
are engaged with their community has paid dividends for us.
So,
Would you mind if I chimed in as well?
sure.
So one of the big things that we just did, pretty much similar to that, is we invited, I think it was 7 African Americans within our community for a meeting. And we just said, we are here to listen. Tell us everything that's on your mind. And so it gave them the opportunity to tell the police department how they felt when they were moving into the city of Upper Arlington, any stereotypes that may have come with it, the parts of Upper Arlington that they love, issues that they've had with any police officers or anything like that. We were just there to have an open mind and to listen. We asked for suggestions. And I think the other big thing with a diversity and inclusion program that I think would help with Bexley too is just the transparency of a couple representatives. When us as diversity and inclusion officers are able to have conversations with people, underrepresented individuals, and just tell them what, you know, the official statistics are. And then they can kind of share with us any kind of bad experiences that they have, and we can keep an eye on that. We can suggest training for any officer who may need it, and just things like that. So it's really about building a bridge between our law enforcement and the community. I think that having that diversity and inclusion program within Bexley, since the demographics, you know, somewhat mirror an Upper Arlington or Dublin, would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I have to say the demographic wise, it's kind of flipped that we have probably less Asians, way less Asians here in Bexley, and more African Americans as far as the minority breakdown is. So that's probably, you know, a little bit unique to that. But at the same time though, my question that now I have is that, so because of this lieutenant officer that who moved around successful program, I don't know if that is the only way that we can have that thing in Bexley. We have to wait the officer to be transferred to Bexley to have that happen, or you know, this program is clearly working and successful in multiple similar community like Bexley. And is there commonly share this knowledge in the police department in Franklin County, or is the Bexley police never heard about this? Just curious how among the police department each other they share this program. Scott, do you know?
Well, I don't know if Bexley is aware of our program or not. I can tell you that it's Dublin's done pretty good about.
They are.
Oh, okay.
I'd let them know about it. So after we talk, Scott.
Hey, so next question. I saw that you were on here, Brian. I know you and I have talked.
Right.
I guess one of the big things for us, like we talked about, was ways to try to, you know, to sell this, and because it's a very positive program for everybody involved, and try to sell this to them. What are you guys getting as the main pushback? Like, is it even if it's not is it just seem to be a lack of interest or a lack of knowledge of what a program like this could do? I'm trying to wrap my head around why Bexley wouldn't jump on something like this.
Yeah.
Well,
So.
yeah. Well, the Brian, you want to say?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I've talked to different officers because we have like a police listening session, and so some of them are, definitely interested. So I don't know if it hasn't been sold correctly. I know Kathy and everybody in the diversity inclusion thing, they put that into kind of our summary. This is something we want to happen, but it was still kind of in this murky spot of like, yeah, we kind of like that, but we're not certain. So it was still kind of, and again, I don't know if we, have sold it, I guess, of all the benefits from there, from not just the community, but from also from a policing standpoint. From there, it allows you to also say, hey, this is what's going on. These are the things. These are the positive benefits from a policing standpoint. So I don't know if that's trickled through the department yet, and so that's why I think there was still just a little bit reluctant.
And I know
Brian, is it possible that there is reluctance from the chief? It sounds like there are officers who are interested in making it happen.
Yes.
Our chief is sometimes slow to take on new problems, to new programs, and he's hearing a lot now about tensions. So a lot of, there's a lot of talk in the community about problems between the police and communities of color. Of all the kinds of solutions that, I don't know how much they know about what people are talking about in terms of solutions. This would seem, of all the solutions, the most palatable to him. So I would think that at this point, he should be more open to it, especially if his officers want it.
It,
Yeah, and then I think it depends on who is selling to them also. And then it seems like, trust me, Brian knows this too, but I tried to do a damage to sell this to Bexley. And every time, including this time, when I mention anything about the police activity or learning from the other community, we just get this hands coming over from the city and the police department that try to kind of put hands over our eyes to not to see what's out there. So the Officer Brown said, well, I have no idea why they're doing this, but it's more like, to me, an individual personality who are either in leadership or decision making. It's not really confident themselves to open up this kind of understand and admit this is great for the community. There's some personal resentment behind this, and otherwise there's no other way to explain, because now not just the Dublin, it's Upper Arlington, it's working. It's like our peers in our community, it's a similar community. So, and also I heard that maybe Worthington is got doing similar thing. That might be just a rumor, but that'll be great. So this is something maybe the Scott Nicholson, can you, yeah, I saw him raise your hand.
yeah, something as far as selling it, it might be better not coming from other police departments or from you guys. It might be best coming from the groups we've been working with. I don't know if it'd be helpful, if something we could do to help is to get a hold of the different organizations and the people that we work with, and just kind of ask them what this program has meant to them, what it's done for them, how it's changed their perception of the police, or if it has or hasn't. But because in Dublin, I don't know that we had a big problem with how our department was perceived by the public, but we still were completely unaware of a lot of issues that these different groups were and populations were even running into. Even if it wasn't a problem with us, if it was something we could help with. So I think if it's okay with you, Corporal, if we could get something together to send, even if it's just a small questionnaire to the groups that we work with, let them know that, Bexley's trying to get this started and they're coming, they're meeting some resistance, and just find out how our program has helped them and what they see as benefits for it and how they think it might help your community as well. That might give it something from both sides instead of just us trying to push something on them.
Yeah, so it's like building a consensus among the resident from your community to recommend for our community to encourage to the police, our own police department, something like that, right? Officer Morris, what do you think? Your understand a little bit about the Bexley culture, so Officer Morris.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut out for a moment. What was your question?
Yes. What do you think about the approach to Bexley, since you know a little bit about our culture?
Well, in Bexley, yeah. I know him, but I didn't work for him. He came after I left. But the deputy chief, I actually was his training officer. So I know him really well, and I would be happy to reach out to him and offer everything we can to help them get this program up and running. Because what's beneficial for us, obviously, we know what's been happening the last few months, but we had the foresight to reach out to our community prior to this happening, and it's paid huge dividends because we are not playing catch up. We are already have contacts established, and quite frankly, we experienced very little problem in Dublin, and I think it's a big part of what Scott Brown and Scott Nicholson did. In the years leading up to reach out to Bexley and offer our assistance to them.
Well, thank you so much. That's a great idea. And hopefully after this, we take it back and then see what we can do to work with that direction. So that's totally great. Anybody else? Jessica, Kate, who hasn't spoke up yet? Anything?
Yeah, I have a question for Emmanuel. And I just wonder, with the culture and climate of the relationship with police and the Black community right now, do you think it's going to be difficult to get the Black community to buy into a program like this? Being open and honest, with the police, as we see more and more, Black Americans being killed at, or whatever at the hands of police officers. I just wonder, since we didn't have the foresight as a community to start this program prior to all of this, what is the buy-in, or do you think, how do we get over those obstacles of getting the Black community to buy into a program like this?
So I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I think it's going to be a lot more difficult trying to initiate a program like this after the fact, whereas Dublin and UA have taken advantage of this beforehand. So I would assume that there is going to be a level of resistance. I think that the biggest thing in getting over that hump is just going to be the consistency. Not to say that the tension is, we're hoping that the tension is going to die down, and as contacts are made and relationships are built, and that's the point of this diversity inclusion program that we have anyway. There's only two of us, but we make an effort to actually go out into the community and have personal conversations. And it's through meetings, it's through, exchanging phone numbers. If they ever have any questions, it's just shoot me a text. I often tell people, I'm not going to talk to you like I'm a police officer. Like, we are human beings. And so establishing those personal relationships is actually what's going to get people over the hump. So like I said, there is going to be resistance, obviously, because the program is being initiated after all this has happened. But if they're going to be serious about it and they're going to be consistent and persistent, they can still work out.
Great. And I have a follow-up question to that. You know, we have
Uh-huh.
2 Black officers on our police department, only 2, 1 man. Oh, 3 Black officers? I thought
Yep.
Bird and Mel, and I don't know the third then. But do
Yeah,
you think it's important? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, no, it's 3, and then we have a Hispanic and an Asian officer. Just
I mean,
FYI.
this could be, you know, to any of the officers. Do you think it will be important to establish that trust for Bexley to have a minority officer, at least one on this diversity task force? Or do you think that's charging, you know, that officer with too much as being one of the few minority officers?
That's a tough question. I think that with diversity and inclusion, your heart needs to be in it. And when we're going through the selection process of who should be a diversity and inclusion officer, Chief Farmer didn't hesitate to say if he doesn't believe that someone's heart is actually in it, he doesn't want them to take that role because he wants it to be 2 individuals that are actually passionate about what's going on. And I see that with the Dublin officers, that it's something that they're passionate about and something that they take seriously. Having a African-American officer in the diversity and inclusion program, I've realized that it's helpful. People feel comfortable talking to me. But at the same time, if an African American were to fill that position just because, you know, they were nudged in that direction, I don't think it's going to pay off. I mean, your heart really has to be in it.
That's a great point, though. My concern is that if we just press to do this system, this unit to be happening in Bexley, and then if they start doing it, but they put people who are not, their heart is in their right place, and then start doing, you know, mimicking this work without their hearts, then that will be actually worse than not having it. So doing it right is, I think, extremely important. Yeah, Officer Nicholson, yes.
Something that I'd say the one hang up our department has run into is, especially with our school resource program, is they put out the photos of the school resource officers, or for a lot of our PR stuff, they'll put out photos, you know, stage photos of officers they've taken. And some of the feedback we've gotten back in the comments of that is, there's Dublin's, you know, 5 minority officers in every photo they ever put out. So, and there's truth to it. I'm not going to pretend there's not, but one thing you have to be careful of is not putting someone out there to be that token person, but it has to be to actually serve a purpose, not just to, especially now, like you said, Emmanuel, that it's a reaction. And so we're putting out who we think these communities want to see rather than who we think is going to do, you know, do a better job, or who wants to do a better job. And the people on the other side see that. If, you know, if they see a certain group of people walking up, they're like, well, of course, you know, this is who is sent out. It's just, you know, these people because they look a certain way, or they, you know, they dress a certain way. But so that's something you have to be very careful with, is not just to send token people out because that's what we think they want to see. We have to do it for the right, you have to make sure it's done for the right reasons.
That's so true. And it is, when I took a tour with the Dublin, the police department, and you guys opened to the community, which we had one time with the old Japanese family. That was actually very fun event. But we learned a lot of things as a resident. But every time when I use, even the dispatchers, you know, they really prepared to deal with people with a different culture or different language, even somebody with a disability, you know, all kinds of things. And I was fascinated to see you guys, particularly in Dublin, that basically thought through to take care of those, you know, inclusive everybody. And I really don't really see Bexley, when I took a tour in Bexley Police Department and shooting range and all that stuff, beyond what they have been in the past. I do not see anywhere to hey, if there's somebody who's speaking Spanish or some other language, they don't have any plan to deal with. So if they can't speak English, too bad. In Dublin officers, you guys use the Google Translation or something, even traffic stop. You guys are prepared to do that. So to me, there's a different culture within a police department will be ready to function as accepting those different culture or different range of human beings. So why do you think that Dublin has those acceptance and maybe some other police department don't have? Any of Scott?
I think for us, it's because it's a normal thing. We have it's close to 50 or 60 spoken languages in Dublin, and most of those as the first language of whoever we're encountering. So it's almost an everyday occurrence where we're having a language barrier with somebody. So it's just normal for us. So I guess we're kind of lucky there that we are just used to dealing with it because it's something we have to do every day.
Now, I would piggyback onto that and say it's also about, as Emmanuel said earlier, when you have your heart in something, you put every effort into that. And being that we have had the connections that we've had, and I don't know if I did a lot of Google Translate prior to the diversity and inclusion unit. A lot of times I would just call a translator. Now I use Google Translate just because I think even though you're using a phone, you're building a connection with that person instead of having somebody else show up on your stop and talk to them. You're no longer communicating with them, whether it's through a phone or not. And I didn't really think about that until after our unit and meeting all the different groups and all the different communities that we deal with. I want to have that conversation, whether I'm talking to you through a phone or not. I want to be the one they're talking to. I don't want to include other people because I care about that relationship. And it goes back to what Emmanuel said. And I think that's a lot of, unfortunately, there may be officers out there that don't, they want to get that call taken care of. They want to get that stop taken care of. They don't want to disrespect people, but they don't care as much about the relationship and the interaction as they do as just clearing that call or clearing that stop.
That's great. Emmanuel, do you want to add your perspective on your department in Upper Arlington? Do you feel the same way as a minority officer?
So I mean, I feel like obviously with what Scott just said, I want to second that, but it's going to depend on your personnel. And like I said, we are lucky enough to have the individuals that we have in our diversity and inclusion program, and Dublin has been phenomenal in their diversity and inclusion program too. But we noticed that we have a language barrier with some of our minority populations, and so we have to ask ourselves, like, what can we do to make everything kind of seamless for them to feel like they fit in with the majority. And so we've been teaming up with a language translation company, and we are working on translating all our forms in 5 different languages right now. We have, domestic violence situations where we have forms that would help someone who can read and speak English, but we want everyone else who maybe speaks Japanese to, have that same knowledge, and to have the same connections of people that they can call. So, I may sound like a broken record, but it's going to depend on, who's in that position and their heart and how serious they want to take it and the effort that they want to put into it, to really bridge that gap.
That's great. Okay, Kathy.
I've really been moved by Emmanuel's statement that you need somebody with heart in a position. And I've got 2 related questions to that. One was, was the job, the position, like, posted to figure out who had a heart for it? Or did they, how did they pick in each of your departments, how did they find officers who had a heart for it? And then for all of you, how important is leadership from the top? I mean, what the story I heard at the beginning sounded like there was a champion who may not have been the chief at the time, but there was leadership to make this happen. How important is it for us to have leadership in the Bexley Police Department championing this? That's a hard word.
Yeah. Any officers?
For ours, it was one of the greatest tools they gave us was kind of they said, these are the goals we want. We've never done this before. We don't know how to do it, but Scott, these are the goals. Now go find a way to do it. And we just kind of there wasn't a set game plan. We knew what we wanted to accomplish. We kind of were given the freedom to divide and conquer as we saw fit, instead of kind of some regimented thing that was put in by people who had never done it before. And I can tell you, we had
they who had that vision to give you that.
As far as I know, it was from Steve Farmer.
Okay.
And
Yes.
unless I'm mistaken, but because he had that vision, and then he gave us the freedom to do it, knowing that we were going to be the ones in contact with people, and that wasn't necessarily going to be him. He just kind of gave us the freedom to go about it the best way we saw fit. And I can tell you, when that leadership was in place, the events we had with that type of leadership compared to events we had with more kind of strict leadership and wanted us to do it a certain way, we had a lot more success at events where we were kind of in charge of it, rather than different levels of administration trying to tell us how to run our events.
Yeah, that's great. So let's switch a gear a little bit. Larry just.
Hey, Keisha, can I ask one question? So Emmanuel, with your community police survey, does that information help you guys make decisions when you send out to the community about how the police is and what changes they like to see?
Yes, it does. In terms of how it's impacted our diversity and inclusion role itself, right now we haven't had the opportunity to dig into that right now. Like I said, we are kind of in our infant stages. We're looking and identifying the groups that we are trying to reach out to and initiatives to put in place for it. But we are definitely planning on utilizing that community survey information to help us out. But the biggest thing too is just we've been out in the community meeting with people, and they're free to text us if there's ever an issue, or if they ever have an idea, and that's kind of what we've been going off of so far.
Great, thanks. That is a good survey too. I like it.
Okay, just curious. I don't know if the officers know, but for the department who doesn't know this unit and try to create this diversity unit, would that be an extra budget, like financially? Is that a big burden for the police department? Like they say, well, we don't have the resources, we don't have the money to do this kind of thing. So do you happen to know, you guys cost a lot to be in that position?
I can speak to that. There's very little cost. We provided the officers a cell phone, and we get the phone. We have such a big contract with Verizon that we actually get the phone, and so the startup cost and the cost of doing this, some overtime here and there, it's cost is not something that should be a factor in this. But I'll echo what Scott said, is the most important part of this is to get people who want to do it.
That's great to know. That's a great information. Thank you so much. Kate.
Thank you. First, thank you so much for giving us your time and letting us ask you questions. I really do appreciate this opportunity. One of the things that I work with is I work with the Education Committee subcommittee. And one of the things that I've been wondering is how has your roles and your program impacted the way that yourselves and the departments that you're a part of interact and work with students and kids, and particularly kids of color and from marginalized backgrounds. I'm just wondering if that relationship in the community has changed as well.
We are just kind of approaching that. With our unit, everything went smoothly, except the pushback we got was actually from the schools to try to get into the schools, because from their point of view, they already had school resource officers. They didn't necessarily want other outside officers coming in to contribute anything at all to education or to, you know, try to get involved in the student groups that they had. And then the other pushback we had was from anyone seeking, I guess best way to describe it, anyone seeking immigration. I reached out to every immigration law firm in the city in multiple ways, and I have never heard back from anyone at all from that group that wanted to work with us. But as far as getting into the schools, we're just now getting there. We've got our foot in now, but you know, for 2 or 3 years, it was just kind of like hitting a wall. We would have to get with them in their community groups because we couldn't do it in the schools, or even get information from the schools about who to even approach.
Interesting. What about the Upper Arlington?
I actually had some issues with my connection there. Could you repeat that question?
Kate, can you?
Sure. I was wondering how your roles and your program has influenced the way that yourself and your department interact with students, particularly students of color and students from marginalized backgrounds.
So within, you know, actually being inside of the schools, we haven't had too much of an opportunity to do that. Like I said, we started in 2020, and you know, as we started, you know, getting our feet under us, COVID hit. They, you know, were taken out of schools, and now where we're at right now, we haven't had that opportunity. You know, just personally, I know that myself and Officer Zoroziak, when we're out in the community, we enjoy building connections with high school students, with middle school students, you know, by playing basketball, things like that. So we've gotten to know some of the students, and I actually just got an email 30 minutes ago from a faculty member at our high school wanting to collaborate in some type of way. So it looks like an opportunity just came up. Looks like something that we're gonna, you know, get into, but we're still early, and with COVID going on, there's been a little bit of a delay. But I think that we do have enough resources to, you know, get involved in the schools, and so yeah.
Great, that sounds exciting.
Thank you.
Yes. So my point was the Larry just joined, and he has a subcommittee of LGBTQIA group, and also we heard that Dublin start having new officers specifically reaching out to that community, and that was just so fascinating. Dublin does it always first. So can Scott explain that new addition officer towards this group?
Hey, Kisa, I actually invited Amber to the meeting today. I got your email where you want to ask
Cool.
that. So I'm going to hand this off to her, and
Great.
I'll let her touch on that, okay?
Great, thank you.
Hey guys, my name's Amber. I'm new to the CLO position here, and I am part of the LGBT community, so it kind of made sense for me to get involved with all of this. echoing everybody else's sentiments about your heart has to be in it. I just happen to be, I guess, a minority within the Dublin Police Department that I've wanted to do this since I started working here. So it was great when the position kind of came up and I thought this is a perfect fit for me. It makes sense since I already have ties directly in that community on a personal level. But it kind of goes along with what we're doing with everything else. It's another minority that's underrepresented, largely misunderstood. And so, we're just trying to make sure that we have someone, mostly myself, to be, I guess, a channel for them to voice any concerns they have, either with law enforcement or, even as an outreach for kids or young adults who might be, experiencing suicidal thoughts. I want to be that connection within the community too, that they can call me direct and we can get through it, because I know that's a large thing within the LGBT community is unfortunately they result to suicide. So just trying to form those connections within the community. I would personally really love to get involved with the schools, just because I think there's so many issues within LGBT youth. So it's more of, I guess, the same, just a different avenue. And we're happy to kind of pioneer whatever may come from this.
Great. Larry, do you have any question?
Well, first of all, I think that sounds really great, and I think it's a much needed. It's much needed, especially in the LGBT community. I know I joined late, so I don't know if you guys may have already covered this, and if so, I can just catch up with my committee. But I was just curious, when we think about diversity and inclusion, that can include a lot of different groups. And I think that immediately you think about Black and brown skinned members of the community, and you think about LGBTQ, those tend to be some of the ones that are most upfront as minority populations. But I'm just wondering, do you guys specifically reach out for different populations, and if so, what types of populations are you looking to try to reach out to? Like, is it socioeconomic? Is there like able-bodiedness, learning differences, that sort of thing? I'm just curious about that.
That's a great question. Yeah, so Amber, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I know kind of what we're doing is, it kind of tailored a little bit to the department as far as demographics are concerned. So, we have, obviously, Scott and Scott have a lot of connections within the Asian community, with the Dublin Police Department, me being LGBT, and then our new officer, Rigo, is Hispanic. So we do that. One of the things that I kind of wrote in my letter when I applied for this position, they asked, where do you see this unit going, and what outreach do you want to have? And obviously LGBT was my first statement on there, but other than that, I really have an interest in homelessness and veterans suffering from PTSD. So whether it's law enforcement or military, and those are kind of little things that I think, as you were saying, sir, they might not be thought about, or they might not be in the forefront of, the media or maybe everybody's mind right now, but they are there. And so I know that we have plenty of military and plenty of law enforcement. We have some homelessness issues in Dublin as well. So it's kind of just figuring out, as an officer, officers within the unit, what are the things that you care about? What are the things you can be all in for, and you just go towards those, as well as tailoring, the demographics of your community that you serve.
I said kind of along the the lines that Amber was talking about. When we first started, our main goal, as far as who to reach out for, was almost specifically demographic related. We had to look at what are the underrepresented populations in Dublin, which for us was the Asian community, is by far our largest segment of minority community. And then once we had kind of done that and made good connections with groups there and kind of started to earn trust from the community, like Amber said, now we brought Amber in, we brought Rigo in, and it's given us, by starting with the groups in our city first, it's given us the foundation and the community trust to start digging much deeper and to reach out to those more and more specific segments.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm also curious about, so there's a clearly in the top level in Dublin Police Department that look into this opportunity, look into this minority, this community, and that thought process is to me very fascinating that I don't really see in Bexley or among, at least from my point of view, that there is some people that left out. So I think it's just no other comment rather than just fascinated that Dublin is coming up with all this different approach and allocating a resource to it. It's really wonderful. So that's great. The Scott.
Just jump on that. One of the benefits that, and I know from my experience with UA, they're the same way. A lot of the ideas that we have in the diversity unit and other ideas, they start at the patrolman level sometimes. And we come up with ideas, we can pass those on. The leadership looks at those ideas, and if they're good ideas, they help us, we can implement those. So I think that's one of the main things is you have this whole group of people that feel comfortable presenting ideas to the leadership and saying, hey, I think this is one area we're lacking in Dublin. Why don't we look at doing this? Nobody else is doing it. Let's make this happen. And they talk about the idea, and then we can implement that. And so I think that may be the greatest benefit. And I can't speak for UA. I know that that it's similar there, but that's one of the greatest benefits I see here in Dublin is that guys and gals feel free to come forward with those ideas, and they actually take them serious.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that might be the approach that we might suggest. But maybe the Officer Morris, when you're in the Bexley, you said that there's no voice for you to defend yourself when you're accused of something. And then, so are you saying that it is hard for you or the patrolman officers level to suggest anything to the senior level, or what do you take on that?
Well, I guess what I meant by that is we were unprepared. We had done nothing to make any connection with our community, and when we were accused of being biased, we quite frankly were unable to say otherwise. We could say it, but we had made no effort of goodwill prior to that accusation. So as Scott have said, we were lucky enough to have Steve Farmer with the foresight of starting this program before the recent events, and so that gave us a good foundation to build from, or to work from. But yeah, I don't know. I can't speak for the leadership in Bexley at this time. It's been a long time since I've worked there, but I can speak for our leadership, and the support we get has been really great for us.
That's great. Emmanuel, do you have anything to add on that point?
I mean, I would just say that we're obviously very blessed to have, Chief Steve Farmer coming from Dublin and already having that idea in his mind. But I mean, with all of our other, lieutenants and sergeants, I think that everyone kind of values understanding our entire community. It makes law enforcement easier when you understand everyone. And so even before, Chief Farmer came into his role in Upper Arlington, I made it very clear during my hiring process that I wanted to be a police officer to bridge the gap within law enforcement and the community. And so before he even came in, I had sergeants and lieutenants, having discussions with me about ideas that we can, initiate to move forward with bridging the gap. And so although, Chief Farmer was the one who initiated the diversity and inclusion program here, our senior leadership staff has all been on the same page about something like that, and that's what's made it kind of seamless for us. So, I mean, the senior leadership and the voice from the patrol officers is going to have a pretty big impact on that too.
That's great to know. Okay, so we passed our 1 hour line, so I'd like to kind of wrapping up. Is there anybody else want to ask question? Okay, Stacy.
Actually, I have two. I just put one in the chat. There are two questions that I have. One of them is, was there any pushback or involvement from the bargaining unit as to whether or not this program could be created? Or is it something that the department can go ahead and create on its own without interference from the bargaining unit?
I'll jump on that real quick. It is something that the department can create because they made it an ancillary position. So basically, it's in addition to your full-time assignment. So being that we had already basically the definition of what an ancillary was, there was nothing contractual at all that was affected by the creation of this.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question is, I had asked about what, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it in the chat, and two of the officers replied back, but the position, one of you had mentioned, Officer Nicholson, that there was a competitive selection process. Was that something that you all came up with on your own as you were going through the creation of the department? Like the process of actually hiring on officers to fill those roles?
Well, go ahead, Corporal.
Well, I was going to say, we just ran a process early this year, and I'm actually in charge of the unit, our diversity unit, and so we posted for one position. We got two candidates that I couldn't say no to, so we ended up taking them both, and they were, and as far as contractually, these officers are not compensated anything additional for what they do. They do this of their own time. I mean, they're paid as police officers, but everything they do for this is there's no extra compensation for that, and so that helps with the contractual issues because there is nothing, no compensation. But as far as the competitive process, we specify that they can't have any complaints of bias within in their file, and then there's I don't have it in front of me, I apologize, but there's a number of criteria, a certain amount of experience on the agency, and again a clean work history.
Glad to know that you guys are all clean, right? All right. Stacy, is that all?
Yeah, that was it. No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great question. So anybody else?
Yeah, this is Brian. I just want to thank everybody from there for taking your time, and I know things are a little bit difficult for everybody, but really truly appreciate you doing this and doing the good work that you're doing in the cities, and you know, we really appreciate that. Just want to thank you.
Yeah, indeed. And then coming and talk to us this time being, it will be very tough, especially last few months or so. But we really appreciate it. And then from after this, my plan is to take it back and then analyze. But I really wanted to connect all of you guys, the UA officers and Dublin officers, for any of us in this meeting or outside. Anybody from the Bexley resident might have some question to you guys. And would that be okay to us individually reaching out to you guys and sharing your contact info and stuff like that? Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, so that then I just hand it to you all and then you guys can make new contacts. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can talk to you guys again some other way. And then stay safe. Thank you for your work.
Hey,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
I believe your microphone is muted.
Oh, hopefully that's better. Sorry, I'm not great with technology.